Yes, good morning to all. Now, I'm Dr. Durga, Associate Professor, Department of Obstetrics and Gynecology at SLIMS Hospital. Now, I'm going to take topic on fibroid uterus. Fibroid, other names are myoma, leiomyoma, and fibromyoma. Most common benign neoplasm in the female. Its incidence is 20 to 40% of reproductive age women. Etiology. It arises from smooth muscle cell of the myometrium, but the exact etiology of it is not known. It may arise from a single cell, that is a monoclonal origin, or it may have sometimes a genetic basis may be there. Other various growth factors like transforming growth factor beta, epidermal growth factor, insulin-like growth factor 1, and insulin-like growth factor 2, and BFGF and other various other growth factors have been documented in the immunohistochemistry of fibroid. The main etiology is there is increased risk from ages like 35 years onwards to 45 years. There's an increased risk of them getting a fibroid, or a history of nulliparous women, or history of low parity, Black women, and strong family history of fibroid, obesity, early menarche, diabetes, hypertension are some of the identified risk factors for fibroid. Those persons which may have decreased risk, that is, those persons who have a higher parity, increased intake of green vegetables, who are athletes like having good exercises, and those patients who had a history of taking progesterone only contraceptives or cigarette smoking, they are found to have decreased incidence of fibroid in them. Genetic basis forms about in 40% of the cases of fibroids. Some genetic bases are like translocation between chromosomes 12 and 14, trisomy 12, rearrangement of short arm of chromosome 6, rearrangement of long arm of chromosome 10, and deletions of chromosome 3 or chromosome 7 are found to have some genetic basis. Estrogen, although not proved for causing myoma, definitely implicated in its growth. That is, it is an estrogen dependent tumor, and those women who are found to have increased secretion of estrogen are found to have high incidence of fibroid in their uterus. So, how the points for that is that we find fibroid during the reproductive age, and it is unlikely before the puberty and regresses after menopause. It may increase during pregnancy, and the condition of the fibroid increasing in pregnancy is called as weight degeneration of the fibroid. Next, estrogen receptors are very rare, are found in higher concentrations. And then common fifth decade due to anovulatory cycles with high or unopposed estrogens. So the site of, depending upon the site of origin of fibroid, we either say it's a corporeal, that is arising from the body of the fibroid. Another one is called cervical fibroid, which accounts to 33% of the cases. And so the most common type of cases is your corporeal fibroid, which accounts to 97%. So fibroids are often described according to their location in the uterus. The occurrence of the fibroid in the submucosal region of the uterus, that is, means it is batting into the endometrial cavity, that you call it as a submucosal fibroid. It may be pedunculated or non-pedunculated depending upon which pedicle, whether it is attached to the uterine endometrium. So this is a uterus and this is an endometrium, and you see a pedicle being attached to it, which you call it as submucosal fibroid. And next you have an intramural fibroid, which arises within the myometrium. And next is a subserosal fibroid, where you see the fibroid is attached, is arising from the serosal layer of the uterus, and it is attached to it by means of a single by means of a long pedicle. So that you call it as subserosal fibroid. So submucosal fibroids are classified by European Society for Gynecendoscopy, which you call it as ESGE, as type 0, type 1, and type 2. Type 0 means the fibroid is there, but it has no intramural extension. Type 1 means it has a fibroid which has an intramural extension which is less than 50%. And type 2 is a fibroid which is having an intramural extension, but it is greater than 50%. So you call it as 0, type 1, and type 2. So this is the picture representation of what I've taught just now. Type 0 is one, you see a fibroid which is wholly pedunculated and it is into the uterine cavity. It is not invading the uterine wall. This is type 1, where you see a fibroid which is abutting into the myometrial surfaces, but the invasion is only less than 50%. Where you see the most of the fibroid or into the myometrial surface, and it is called greater than 50% of it is invaded. So you call it as type 3 submucosal fibroid. So type 0, type 1, and type 2. Describing the pathology of that, the fibroid on a cut surface, it is a well circumscribed white firm mass with a whorled appearance. You see here a whorled appearance, and this is a whorled appearance. It's surrounded by a false capsule, or called as a pseudo capsule, which is nothing but formed by the compression of the uterine muscle. So you here in this picture, you see two fibroids, and this fibroid, you see it is an intramural fibroid, but it's more than 50% of the intramural is involved, and it's also abutting into the submucosa region. So it's a submucosal fibroid of type 3. Okay. It's also deteriorating the endometrial cavity. Okay. This is another fibroid here, sitting onto the anterior wall of the uterus. So this part is the internal os, and this part is called the cervix. Microscopically, the cut section of which shows smooth muscle fibers and connective tissues. So smooth muscle fibers are elongated, spiral shaped, which are eosinophilic, with a long nucleated or long elongated bacilli, the nuclei which is present there. And here surrounded by, this is the muscle fiber and surrounded by plenty of connective tissue. Symptoms. Most of the fibroids, where about 50% of the fibroids are asymptomatic, and at the same time 50% is symptomatic. So what are the symptoms a normal fibroid can cause? It can cause an abnormal uterine bleeding, or it can have a pelvic pressure and pain. Pelvic pressure or pain, or sometimes it can produce reproductive dysfunction. So three main thing is abnormal uterine bleeding, pelvic pressure, pain, and reproductive dysfunction. So what is the abnormal uterine bleeding seen there? It is the most common symptom. The most important type is menorrhagia. Menorrhagia means increased amount of flow, which is present more than 80 ml. And intermenstrual bleeding means it's a bleeding in between the menses. Postmenopausal bleeding, it can present as a bleeding after the stoppage of menstruation or after menopause. So they are not. So the main thing is that the abnormal uterine bleeding can present as any of these three forms: menorrhagia, intermenstrual bleeding, and postmenopausal bleeding. Secondary pathological degenerative changes and complications of fibroid. So what are the secondary degenerations you see there? It can be an atrophy of the fibroid, or a necrosis of the fibroid, or a degeneration of the fibroid. And other changes like malignancy, infection, torsion, incarceration, and inversion of the uterus are some known complications of the fibroid. So what is the percentage of malignancy? It is on the percentage of malignancy in the reproductive age group is only 0.1%. But after the age of 60 years, if you see a fibroid, the rate of malignancy is 1.7%. In the sense of 100 women of age group above 60 years of age, With a fibroid, only 1.7 women, that is hardly less than 1.1 to 2 women are getting affected, and the risk of malignancy is there. So what are the signs of a patient showing fibroid? Because of the increased menorrhagia and the bleeding, the patient may have pallor. Okay, they may show pallor. On examination per abdomen, if the size of the uterus is greater than 12 week size, you can feel a mass in the suprapubic region. That mass is usually firm, and it is nodular, and it is arising from the pelvis. The lower limit can be reached, relatively well defined, mobile from side to side, non-tender, dull on percussion, and no free fluid in the abdomen. So normally a fibroid is generally situated in the center, whereas an ovarian swelling is situated laterally, and therefore it is not seen as a swelling in the suprapubic region. The consistency of the mass of a fibroid is usually firm, whereas for an ovarian cyst, it is usually cystic in consistency. The first surface of the fibroid mass is very rough, and it is very irregular, and the borders are also irregular. So the upper borders are well defined, whereas the lower border cannot be identified because it is continuous with the uterus. Mobility is present from side to side, and it is relatively non-tender, and the borders are well defined, and on percussion we have a dull node. If you compare this with an ovarian swelling, which is soft, cystic, and round, okay, and it is more round, the borders are well defined above, whereas the lower border, it can be felt in an ovarian mass is usually felt, and it's usually mobile from side to side, and also vertically and horizontally also, and usually non-tender is also dull on percussion. On per speculum examination of a fibroid, because of the large fibroid, the uterus is pulled up, the cervix may be higher up, uterus is enlarged, and it is nodular, and you find two important signs. One is called movement of the mass is transmitted to the cervix. So you call cervical motion test is positive. Another one, you don't feel the notch, that is on palpating, on doing a bimanual pelvic examination, you feel a notch between, you feel normally a groove between the ovary and the uterus. So this is not normally felt, but whenever there is a mass arising from the ovary, a groove or an indentation can be felt per vaginally and bimanually, okay, between the ovary and the uterus. So this is called groove sign, and this notch is not present if the mass is attached to the uterus. Fibroid diagnosis. So clinically, we can come to a diagnosis of fibroid from the symptoms and signs, and from specific certain good history. And by ultrasound also, we can identify fibroids as well-defined hypoechoic lesions, peripheral calcification with distal shadowing in old fibroids. Now you see in this picture, an ultrasound picture here, right? And this is the uterus, and this is the fibroid which is present there. This is actually a sac, okay? And this is a fibroid, and this fibroid is showing a shadow to the posterior aspect, that is present in a Kausting shadow. So two types of ultrasound you can do. You can do either transabdominal ultrasound, or you can do a transvaginal ultrasound. Now always for a transabdominal, compared to transabdominal, and transvaginal is more specific and gives accurate details if the size of the fibroid is very small, whereas if the size of the fibroid is quite big, transabdominal ultrasound will give a better idea. So generally by ultrasound you can find the size and number of the fibroids present, and it can differentiate the tumor from other swellings such as ovarian tumor, which can be done clinically, but it's always confirmed by an ultrasound examination. So now you see a picture of an ultrasound here of a fibroid, where this is a transabdominal. This is a transabdominal. The probe is like this in a transabdominal, and you see the first one is a bladder, which is partially filled, which is or not. It is about 3/4 filled. And here you see this is a big uterus which is present. The uterus is seen in a transverse plane, and you see one thing which is abutting anterior into the bladder boundary, you call this is the fibroid which is present there. So uterus which is seen in the transverse plane. Okay, so by ultrasound you can identify a fibroid. Another test is called saline infusion sonography. Now what we do this is that this is a uterus which is sitting here and this is a cervix, and we introduce a catheter. We introduce a catheter and send saline, a normal saline, a fresh prepared, a fresh saline must be sent, okay, through the catheter to see if it distance the uterine cavity. Now, as this distance a uterine cavity, you see this whole black one is the water which is water content which appears black in ultrasound, and you see one mass which is abutting and is almost freely floating in the uterine cavity is a submucosal fibroid. Of course, other method to directly confirm whether it's a fibroid is that to directly visualize a fibroid through a hysteroscope. This hysteroscope is an instrument which is put into the vagina, over which into the uterus. Now you see here a small polyp, a small thing. It's just a mucosal plug which is attached to the uterine wall. And this is a fibroid you see here. Now you see the two condenses. This fibroid is big and compared to this one, and it is more firm when compared to this. Right? So this is a polyp where this is a fibroid. So via hysteroscopy, you can identify that. Next is intravenous pyelogram. This is a one which is not routinely now nowadays, but it's a very good investigation. Suppose we have to differentiate a fibroid and like a broad ligament fibroid from other masses. So in cervical and broad ligament fibroid, there are two types of fibroid where the course of the ureter can be disturbed at its end. So the course of the ureter will be disturbed and obstruction to the flow of urine, causing hydroureteronephrosis, and it may also cause, because of that, secondary kidney damage leading to kidney dysfunction. So hydronephrosis can be identified with the intravenous pyelogram if it is a quite a big fibroid. Fibroid diagnosis. So other methods is that we saw first ultrasound, and next we saw SSI, saline infusion sonogram, and after that we saw hysteroscopy, and then we saw IVPs. And then we saw normal ultrasound scans. Now there are other methods like MRA, a better scan. It's a most accurate imaging modality for diagnosis of fibroid. It does precise fibroid mapping and characterization. That is exactly can find in the number of fibroids. It can differentiate from adenomyosis and annexal pathology. Ovaries are usually seen and detects very small myomas of even 0.5 centimeters. Okay, so MRA is done when you have, it's not but routinely practiced. Okay, HSG is a hysterosalpingogram, which is not done routinely for diagnosis. It is done for evaluating any filling defects. Okay, that can be seen. Next, this is a fibroid mass which is sitting here. A fibroid mass which is seen in an MRI, correct? This MRI shows a big mass which is present, and this is a pelvic bone you see here. This is a pelvis, and here you see this is a rectum or the bladder. I'm sorry, this is a rectum which is present here filled with the gas shadow, and this is the sacrum which is here, and here you see this here the contrast which is a displaced ovaries, and here you see the mass which is present here, and this is speck is the ureter which is ending. Okay. You see in MRI in a sagittal section, we see a big fibroid which is sitting there, and you see the uterine cavity is compressed and somewhere over the posterior wall. So what are the differential diagnoses for a fibroid is? Always we must rule out pregnancy. Okay, next is adenomyosis, ovarian tumors, ectopic pregnancies, endometriosis, and TIVO masses or tubovarian mass. The management of a fibroid is depending upon its symptoms. Okay, if it is asymptomatic, the management is and the size of the fibroid is less than 12 weeks, and they have always neared menopause, means you don't have to do anything because it is asymptomatic, and the size is small and they are almost near the menopause. Regular follow-up every 6 months is essential, and recent guidelines suggest up to 16-week size, however difficult to practice. Okay, so if it is asymptomatic and the size of the fibroid is less than 12 weeks, and if the patient is approaching menopause, you can wait and watch. Okay, so the basic treatment modalities are, it could be medical, it could be surgical, it could be other methods like embolization of both uterine arteries, which should be done, or MRI focused, guided focused ultrasound. This is called MRI focused ultrasound. Why this MRI guided focused ultrasound is another newer one which has been in the treatment of fibroid, of medical, surgical, and embolization. And this surgical, you have myomectomy and hysterectomies. Okay, going on to the medical management. It's not a definitive treatment. Okay, medical management, but it's usually given for symptomatic relief. Preoperatively, it is done to decrease the size of the fibroid, and other drugs like progestogens, antiprogestogens like mifepristone, androgens like danosolgestrone or GnRH analogs are used. The most common one are the progesterones, antiprogesterone, mifepristone, and GnRH analogs are used to treat fibroids. The GnRH analogs are agonists are commonly used, triptolurline, decapeptyl 3.75 mg or leuprolide depot 3.75 mg IM or goserelin 3.6 mg subcutaneous for 3 months. Advantages: decreases in the size of the myoma by 20 to 50%, decrease in the bleeding and increases HB level, and decreases blood loss during surgery, converts hysterectomy into myomectomy, and converts abdominal hysterectomy into vaginal. So the main thing is that you give GnRH analogs to reduce the size of the fibroid before you take it up prior to the surgery. GnRH analogs. Disadvantage is that it's a very high cost and hypoestrogenic side effects are there. The effect is reversible and rarely increases bleeding due to degeneration, occasionally difficult in enucleation. Okay. GnRH analogs, antagonist are there. Centrorelix is used to 60 mg IM, repeated after 3 to 4 months if necessary. Initial flare-up does not occur. So what are the surgical management is? Either you remove the myoma or you remove the uterus. They hold the uterus by abdominal, vaginal, LAVH or TLH. The same thing you do for myomectomy. Apart from that, you do laparoscopic myomectomy also, cystoscopic vaginal removal of fibroid, and this one. In the surgical management, vaginal hysterectomy is favored in the following. If the uterine size is less than 16 weeks, preferably less than 14 weeks, no associated pathology like endometriosis, PID, adhesions, uterus mobile and adequate lateral space in the pelvis is present, and experienced vaginal surgeons. Myomectomy is done in the following conditions like in infertility, recurrent pregnancy loss, or other causes due to any other cause. Young patients who wish to preserve their uterus. Hysteroscopic myomectomy for submucosal myoma causing infertility, recurrent pregnancy loss, AUB, or pain. Criteria is less than 5 centimeters in size and less than 50% intramural component and less than 12 centimeters square uterine size. Laparoscopic myomectomy in 3 phases: excision of the myoma, repair of endometrium, and extraction. Suitable for subserous and intramural up to 10 centimeters. Complications are those of appurative laparoscopy and myomectomy. So what is this abdominal myomectomy? Other factors for infertility should be ruled out. Consent for hysterectomy, blood cross-matched and ready, pap smear and endometrial sampling to rule out the malignancy, and medical or mechanical means to control blood loss. Boney's myomectomy clamp, rubber tourniquet, manual pressure at the isthmic region, or use of vasopressin 10 to 20 units diluted in 100 ml of saline infiltrated before putting the incision. Minimum incisions are kept, preferably single midline vertical tunneling in incisions and lower and anterior wall. Removal of as many fibroids as possible through one incision, secondary tunneling incision. Meticulous closure of all the dead spaces and proper hemostasis. Multiple small fibroids can be removed en bloc by wedge resection, and measures for adhesion prevention should be taken. So you see a step of fibroid where you put an anterior single incision inside the capsule, get the fibroid knocked off as easily. Okay, here, but it's not easy as you see in the picture. After that, you have to remove the uterine, you have to stitch the uterine walls. Vaginal myotomy, any submucous, pedunculated, or small sessile cervical fibroids are removed vaginally. Ligation of the pedicle if accessible. Twisting of the fibroids if pedicle not accessible in case of small and medium-sized fibroids. To gain access to pedicle of higher and big fibroid, incision of the cervix may be warranted. So laparoscopic myolysis by ND Yag Laker is done without blood supply myoma atrophies applicable to 3 to 10 centimeter size and myomas less than 4 in number. Cryophylaxis is under investigation. So uterine artery embolization by interventional radiologist, catheter is passed retrograde through the right femoral artery to bifurcation of aorta and then negotiated down to the opposite uterine artery first. Polyvinyl alcohol particles or gel foam are used for embolization. Now, 60 to 65% of reduction in the size of the fibroid and 80 to 90% of have improvements in menorrhagia and pressure symptoms. So this is a picture of uterine artery embolization where you see the catheter is inserted right here and through which it is reaching the ovarian vessels, okay, the opposite side, incision, and the pellets or the foam materials are entering into the circulation and causing abrupt blood flow supply decrease. Okay, so this uterine artery embolizations, high vascularity and solitary fibroids are associated with a greater chance of long-term success. So pregnancy, active infection, and suspicion of the pregnancy are absolutely contraindicated. Desire for fertility is also a contraindication. The risk of ovarian failure must be counseled. Post-embolization syndrome can occur, fever, vomiting. So this is a uterine artery embolization. Some newer agents used in the treatment are, the first one is Mirena. Mirena is a third generation IUCD. It contains progesterone, levonorgestrel 60 mg, releasing 20 mics per day. Fibroids decrease in size 6 to 12 months per day. And here, future research in fibroid are MRI guided focus ultrasound therapy, selective progesterone receptor asoprisnil, and then somatostatin analogs like lantriolide. So this is your MRI guided focus ultrasound where you see the person is lying in a prone position and entered into that room, a CT scan room. In the prone position over this one, with the help of the uterus, you should wait the help of this. You should ask the patient to lie on the side, and with the site of the fibroid where it is, the shots of this MRI focus ultrasound is done. Okay, so we go on to certain MCQs like the most common type of uterine leiomyoma, intramural, subserosal, submucosal, broad ligament. So guess the answers. The answers are most common type is intramural. Which of the following is for the symptomatic treatment of fibroid? Is for symptomatic testosterone, OCPs, GnRH agonist, JRH antagonist. Most common symptom of fibroid is an abdominal uterine bleeding, pelvic pain, mass in abdomen, abdominal discomfort. Most common pelvic tumor of reproductive age group is uterine fibroid. I hope the class is a little bit clear for you. So on the whole, fibroid is a very important topic. We have to be, it's a most favorite exam case and also a theory discussions case, fibroid. So what you must know in fibroid is what are the types of fibroid and what are the changes that occur when the fibroid grows, like some secondary degeneration, some degenerations are very common, like hyaline degeneration, calcareous degeneration, hyaline degeneration, red degeneration, Calabrese degeneration. So many types of degenerations we see. So there's one more entity whether this fibroid is going to complicate a antenatal women, means you cannot opt for them surgery immediately. So at the time of delivery, whether it's planned cesarean or it's a planned cesarean or in a planned vaginal delivery or any other things, we have to be very careful of this fibroid complicating, because anytime the fibroid may flare up, that is the symptoms and signs may flare up, the size of the fibroid can also go high. During pregnancy, it takes place because it is an estrogen dependent hormone. And regarding the one another issue is the infertility, for which the patient would have come. But on examinations, you may find the size of the uterus is more than 12 weeks. Okay. And those cases, we have to thoroughly investigate and find uh, whether any other uh, fibroids are left out. So I hope I made clear. So any doubts, anything you have, you can add with the chat box. Okay, thank you.